Hello. I hope you're doing well today. I talked about last week talking about chapter 4 to this week. Um, so I know that things are coming due related to that this week. However, I still want to get this out. You can go back and review it and all that. So what I want to talk about today are some of the core pieces of operant conditioning, um, made famous, popularized, accredited to, um, however you want to say it, to B.F. Skinner. Hopefully, you read about him, you've heard of him, you know about him. And just overall, in general, when you look at a behaviorist perspective, very, very anti theoretical or anti mentalistic. Okay. What's meant by that is in complete um, opposition to these notions of introspection and inner life and all of that. It's back to it's all about what is external. It's all about what can be seen. So I just want to speak today briefly on reinforcement and punishment, and then the different reinforcement schedules that are out there, and how uh, you can see I'll talk about the evolution of nagging. So how nagging is explained from a behaviorist perspective, and then if you wanted to teach a pig to dance, which you probably watched the videos of rap basketball or read about the rap basketball, um, you know, and all that's done through a process known as shaping, where you reward successive approximations toward the goal. Um, so, getting into the core tenets and without giving all the history, just getting into the core ideas associated with reinforcement and punishment, and then reinforcement schedules. So you have four types of ways that you can that someone would try to modify behavior or shape behavior, um, using one of these four techniques or combining them. Um, there's a great video out there. If you enjoy the television show The Big Bang Theory, there's a great video out there with Sheldon attempting to reinforce what he believes to be appropriate behavior through from Penny. Um, very, very, they nail it pretty well as it goes with positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. So they nail it pretty well. Um, so that's something, if you can go to the YouTubes and put in operant conditioning, Big Bang Theory, and then it's about a 6-minute video. So, one thing right out the gate, no matter what, whether it be positive or negative, reinforcement seeks to increase a behavior. No matter what. See, sometimes we think positive, negative is good or bad, but whenever it comes to behaviorism, don't think in terms of good or bad. Think more in terms of mathematics, where positive is additive, and negative is subtractive. So anytime, whether it be positive reinforcement or positive punishment, you are presenting some type of stimulus. Um, whether it be negative reinforcement or negative punishment, you are removing something. And again, no matter what, whether it be positive or negative, reinforcement seeks to increase a behavior, punishment seeks to decrease a behavior. Um, one of the top, I swear it seems like one of the big questions on intro to psych exams is the differentiation between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, um, or just in general understanding what negative reinforcement is, and in terms of what is going on as it goes with stimulus response. Because again, people think, okay, if it's negative, then they just think bad. They're trying to stop something, right? But that's actually what punishment does. Side note, Skinner was not an evil person by any means, and he really had hoped for a utopian society in his own way. Walden 2 would be a great read for you if you're really into this behaviorism stuff. And so he felt that positive reinforcement was the best way of all the different types to truly, from a more macro perspective, from a bigger picture, positive reinforcement is the best way to not only change behavior and modify behavior, but for it to be long-lasting behavior. So I have like this really rough, and there was one in your PowerPoint as well. I have this like really rough kind of graph, little boxes, if you will, on the differentiation. So you see right there, I have present, I have increase, and then in that box, that equals positive reinforcement, right? Then I have remove, increase, right? And that's negative reinforcement. I'll give you some examples of those in a second. And again, right over here, or on this other side, right here, I have reinforcement and punishment, and what they seek to do. So present, decrease, positive punishment, remove, decrease, negative punishment. Okay, so, hopefully you were able to kind of commit that to memory, or you're looking at the PowerPoint. Positive reinforcement, the classic example of presenting some kind of reward, some kind of pleasant stimulus, something that the organism wants in order to increase the behavior, right? Giving a bonus, for making a cell, or some parents would reward their children for good grades, total example of positive reinforcement, right? I'm going to present a positive stimulus so you'll increase the behavior of good grades, of getting good grades. So positive reinforcement, that one, people don't seem to ever get, too caught up on. Negative reinforcement, okay. So you're probably thinking, well, what is it that we're doing whenever we're trying to increase a behavior, but yet we're removing something? And some of you are probably thinking, well, if there was this like really, really heavy collar on me, right? And every time I behaved in a way that you wanted me to behave, you removed that collar. That's an example of negative reinforcement. You're trying to increase my behavior by removing an aversive stimulus. The classic example, you get in your vehicle, if it's within the last 20 years probably, maybe less than that, but you get in your vehicle, what do you hear? That annoying beeping sound, right? Beep, 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 right? It'll keep going off and keep going off until you do what? Put your seatbelt on, right? That's seeking to increase the behavior of clicking your seatbelt. I remember I had a friend that just hated to wear a seatbelt for whatever reason, and he would like try to push the button on the seat, and it would work on older model vehicles, but not so much anymore. So taking an Advil for a headache, right? You're trying to remove the aversive stimulus. You're trying to remove the pain of the headache that's being caused by presenting, you're trying to remove that with pills, right? So to increase the behavior of pill taking in order to remove that. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, either way they want to increase the behavior. Positive punishment, negative punishment. You present, right? In positive punishment, you present, remember, no matter what, you may be presenting or removing, right? So whenever you're presenting, again, think about it as in mathematics, it's additive. You're adding something, right? Negative, you're removing something. So with positive punishment, and a lot of times we don't even differentiate these in the lay people's world. So positive punishment is a spanking, right? One example, you are presenting an aversive stimulus in order to increase a particular behavior, in order to decrease a behavior, right? No matter what punishment, decrease a behavior, reinforcement increase, right? And you see that, and there's differing opinions. I'm not going to get into that debate about is spanking effective, is it not effective, but But either way, positive punishment, you're presenting something in order to decrease a behavior, right? Same concept as whenever they would present, electric shocks to somebody to get them to stop doing something. And finally, negative punishment. Okay, well, what are we removing in order to try to decrease the behavior? Oftentimes, just think of the classic example, you got home late, it really wasn't your fault that that this particular person decided that they didn't really care about your curfew, and you were stuck riding with them, right? The parents like, you should have made better decisions, should have made better choices, whatever. Negative punishment, right? You're removing something that the organism wants in order to decrease the behavior. So in that case, what are you removing? Freedom, right? If you ground, so the grounding. If you got grounded because you missed curfew, so the grounding of the individual is a perfect example of negative punishment, removing a desired stimulus in order to decrease the behavior. So in that case, in order to decrease the behavior of coming home late. Okay, so that was just a quick little run through, but hopefully maybe a simplistic way to really differentiate these and get that down once and for all. Once I heard it that way and kind of read it that way, then I was able to really always be able to remember it whenever I think about it, in terms of mathematics, and whenever I remember that reinforcement, no matter what, seeks to increase, punishment seeks to decrease. Okay, so how does this all work, right? Whenever we're trying to change behavior, modify behavior, do I want to constantly present, right, a reward, right? Is that going to work? Possibly in the beginning. But is it going to maintain? No. And we'll talk about why when we start looking at these different reinforcement schedules. So when we're saying reinforcement schedules, what we're saying is, okay, if we're on a continuous reinforcement schedule, then every correct response is reinforced, right? So at first, what's usually suggested at first is whenever you're trying to shape a behavior, get an organism to behave in a certain way, that you want to have that continuous reinforcement at first, so that association is built, right? I do this, I get a piece of candy, right? I behave in the way you want me to behave, I get a piece of candy, okay? So that's continuous reinforcement. Every single correct response is reinforced. And then you have different types of intermittent reinforcement. And if you think about what intermittent means, it's not continuous, right? It's varied. And then depending on how you're going to choose to do that is kind of based on the schedule that you pick. So you have ratio and interval, right? So ratio, just think of number of responses, right? So you have ratio and interval, and you have fixed and variable. Sometimes you'll see the word random used, but I prefer fixed variable, and then ratio interval. Okay, so same thing, you could draw your own box based on these. You could put fixed ratio, you could put ratio interval, right? You could put fixed variable, and then you could put what those examples would be in there. For example, let's see. Let's say that we own our own business, okay, and we're wanting to reward in some way. We want to use one of these reinforcement schedules for the sale of, let's say, a car. Okay, so we have a car business, and we want to reward our salespeople anytime they make a sale, possibly, right? So if we're doing that on a fixed ratio schedule, then basically it would be one of those deals where every fifth car that you sell, you get a bonus. So no matter what, it does, every fifth car that you sell, you get a bonus, and it's fixed at that ratio, right? It's not just some random number of responses or number of sales. It's every fifth sale, you get a bonus. Could be effective, right? You're thinking, okay, I need to get to that, I'm going to need to get to that fifth cell, right? Get the bonus. So that could be effective in increasing the behavior of making sales or talking to customers, whatever would need to happen to be able to make the sell. So fixed ratio is a fixed number of responses. You know, every 10th time the rat pushes a lever, he gets a treat, right? Fixed ratio. It's fixed, just as it sounds. Fixed interval. So interval is time. Ratio is number. Interval is time. So a fixed interval is the classic example of getting paid every 2 weeks. So no matter what, doesn't matter how many sales you make, every 2 weeks you're going to get paid. Sounds a lot like certain types of reinforcement schedules that a lot of our kind of state organizations are under and government entities, right? Perhaps for some people, doesn't matter how hard you work or how many sales you make or whatever it is you do or what kind of customer service you provide, every 2 weeks you're getting paid regardless, right? So time, a fixed amount of time, right? If you're on a once a month reinforcement schedule, then you're getting paid once a month, right? So back to our sales example, no matter what, if they make sales, they don't make sales, every 2 weeks they're going to get paid, which usually there's a base, not necessarily in car sales, when you have a draw, car sales you have a draw, but in other commission type work, some people can negotiate for a base salary, but either way, fixed interval, every 2 weeks or once a month, whatever it may be, you're going to be reinforced. Here's where we get into the fun stuff. Variable ratio. So what has been suggested is an intermittent reinforcement schedule, and I would even go as far as to say is a variable ratio or variable interval schedule has the greatest chance of increasing a behavior. Okay, so what did I say about the evolution of nagging? Okay, so this would go into the fixed or the variable ratio schedule, right? So you've seen the classic example. You've seen it. You've been at a grocery store. There's the parent that has the kid, and they are very brilliant in putting the candy where they put the candy, so the kid can see it, right? And so you have the kid. He starts asking for the candy, and the parent, they don't want to give him the piece of candy, right? So the kid's like, "Can I have some candy?" The parent's like, "No, candy, no, candy, no, candy, no, candy, no, candy." Okay. And then the next time they go to the store, and the parent's like, "Okay, you're coming up to it. You know what's going to happen, so we're just going to stay strong, right? Candy, no, 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 no, candy, no, candy, no." Okay. So what happens is they don't know when they have to emit the right response or the right behavior to get what they want. In other words, they don't know how many times they have to say it, but they know eventually, right, you're going to get what they want because you've created that reinforcement schedule. It's almost like you might as well just give it to them on the first time because that's not as bad as a variable ratio, because variable ratio, they're just going to keep doing it, right? It's the same thing as someone in complete commission sales of door knocking, right? They don't know how many times they're going to have to knock on the door, but when they get that one sell, right, or they get another sell or another one, they don't know how many doors they're going to have to knock on. So that means what? Well, you keep increasing and increasing the number of doors you knock on because you don't know how many you're going to have to do to get it. The slot machine is on a variable ratio schedule, right? You pull the lever on the old school slot machines. You don't know how many times. You don't know when that thing's going to pay off. I mean, they kind of set it up, but at some point it's going to, right? Variable ratio. So our car sales example, you don't know how many sales you have to make to get a bonus, but like one time you did 3 sales and I gave you a bonus. Your very next sale I gave you a bonus, and I didn't give you a bonus until 10 sales later, and then I gave you 2 sales. You see how crazy that is, right? You see how variable that is. You have no way of knowing, but you know that at some point you're going to get it. So variable ratio, you could see why it would increase that behavior because you don't know when it's going to happen. So I better keep doing it because I don't know when I'm going to get that reinforcer. And finally, variable interval schedule. So with the variable interval schedule, there you go. It's a variable amount of time, right? So let's say I decided that, I've decided I'm just going to randomly show up while you're at work doing your sales, and then I don't know when, but and you don't know when, but every so often I see you talking to a customer and I'm gonna reward you for it. So maybe not even making a sale, but I see you talking to a potential customer, and you don't know when I'm gonna show up, right? I might show up 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, not for another 2 weeks. You don't know, but I've established this reinforcement schedule where, man, I don't know when it is, but it's really random times that he shows up and gives me a bonus when he sees me talking. Well, what is that supposed to do? What do we hope that does if you're using that reinforcement schedule? That's going to increase, right? The number that you're always talking to a customer, because you don't know when I'm going to show up to see you talking to a customer and give you that bonus, right? You don't know that every 2 weeks I'm showing up, or every 5 days I'm showing up. It's completely random. So what would that do? Hopefully increase to where you're always talking. Anytime there's a customer there, you're able and you're always talking to them. Now, don't get too caught up in the specifics. Just understand that it's based on a random amount of time. Okay, so and that's pretty much the core of it, right? This can get way more deep, right? And if you are into this, and you'll get into take a behavior analysis, behavior management class, and then you also have the opportunity to really go further with this, and start doing some applied behavioral analysis as it goes with, if you're really, really into this. And a lot of people get into it because it's easy to understand, it's simplistic. All these things I just talked about, all these things I just described, they sound great in theory, but they don't always work out for various reasons. Because remember I said the word DISC a while back, or last week, deprivation, immediacy, size, and consistency. So if any of that's off, right, then this doesn't work out. But that's what this is based on, right? But again, if I'm not hungry, right, if I don't need money, then I'm not deprived, right, or the money's not enough, so the size isn't there, or there's just not enough consistency. Now you're like, how can you be consistent but still be variable? Because you've got to, it's got to happen every now and then, right? You can't just go too long, and sometimes that's what occurs, is that association isn't built because you haven't established it, which is why you kind of go into, sometimes what will be done is continuous reinforcement in order to get the organism how you want. So until you can start kind of fading that away. You have a pig. Pig already engages in certain behaviors that you need it to engage in. If you want it to dance, whatever you decide to operationally define as dancing, if you say moving their feet forward and moving their feet backward is dancing. So let's say you were using a continuous reinforcement schedule. Every time the pig moved their foot forward or moved their feet back, feet, their hooves, right? Then you would reward that, right? So if you were using positive reinforcement. If you were using negative reinforcement and you had this big, huge, heavy collar on the pig, right? Anytime the pig moved forward and backward, if that's what you wanted it to do, then you would remove the collar. And you would do that continuously until they started to form that association, right? So think about if they were teaching, rats, or teaching pigeons to turn, right? They're doing is rewarding successive approximations toward that goal, right? So if the pig is not even quite yet stepping, taking 4 or 5 steps forward or 4 or 5 steps back, but takes 1 step forward, 1 step back, you reward that, right? Because it's a successive approximation toward the goal. So if you're using positive reinforcement, you'd be presenting something positive to the pig. If you're using negative, then you'd be removing an aversive stimulus. Some people think that negative reinforcement is more effective. Do what you want with that. I mean, I can see that, right? If I have a very painful stimulus on me, and I want it to go away, right, then I'm probably going to do whatever behavior I need to do and continue to do that behavior till I could get it to go away. In fact, in that video, if you end up watching it, Sheldon and Leonard start arguing, or not arguing, but he's saying, If you let me use negative reinforcement, I'll have her, doing, whatever it is, by the end of the day. Right? Positive reinforcement, take a few days, but you let me use negative reinforcement because, you have that painful stimulus being presented, and you want it removed. You could probably get, if you're using positive punishment or negative punishment, if the pig, behaved in a way that you didn't want it to behave, that you didn't associate with dancing, and you were using positive punishment, now you could see why it might be hard to figure out, what's the problem here? That is for the organism, right? But if you're using positive punishment, you would be presenting a painful stimulus, or or an aversive stimulus to the pig, to get it to stop doing whatever it was that you didn't consider to be associated with dancing. Probably don't want to go that method. I know you're sitting there thinking, well, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, they sound a lot alike. Yeah. I can see where you would think that. And then you can start to really get into some circular logic when you really start thinking about this stuff and get real deep into it. But we don't have to do that right now. And then finally, if you're using negative punishment, if the pig enjoys being free and not in their cage, and the pig engages in a behavior you don't consider associated with dancing, then you put the pig up in their pen. I would go with positive reinforcement anytime I'm trying to shape a behavior. Not anytime, but because that's a dangerous generalization. But most of the time, that's going to be my default. They have found that positive reinforcement on an intermittent schedule usually has the best outcomes for long-term and long-lasting behavior change. Right? You can use punishment, right? But it's not long-lasting, is what the literature suggests. Okay, so I've been wanting to keep these videos much shorter. So let's see, we're at about 30 minutes, so that's about 10 minutes shorter. So again, I put this up so that way you would have a little bit, more simplistic explanation of these core, operant conditioning terms. So positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Hopefully you understand the differentiation between all those now. You have some good examples. And then you also understand the reinforcement schedules, fixed ratio, variable ratio, fixed interval, variable interval. And then the word disc. Okay, so go forth with your week. I hope to have a video out related to chapter 6, within the next couple of days. Goodbye for now.